And so I will not be before you long. I want to spend some time talking to you about some direction that we're going in WISD. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you a little bit about myself and my background. I think it's critical that you know a little bit about this guy that just moved into your town. What is he all about? What is his core beliefs? And so I have and will continue to describe myself. What I do is describe myself in the concept of what I call the big three. Okay, now first of those big three, the biggest and baddest of those is my faith. And I stand on that. I'm a Christian and I lead with Christian values. And I think that's important that you know that about me. I understand our law about separation of church and state, and I will abide by our laws. But you have to know that that's what I'm about. That's how I was raised, and I truly, we all lead based on our core beliefs. And that's how we lead as well. Number two is my family. I tell you, I am blessed. I have a lovely wife, Stephanie. She is an educator as well. She is an elementary school principal on the west side of Houston there. I tell you, I was blessed. She is awesome. She supported me. I've drug her around the state as I've been trying to pursue my goals. And I tell you, she's been very supportive. And so we kind of talked about how many nights, our date nights, are at school events. It's very difficult with our time, with our schedules, but we understand this is our passion, this is what we do. And so we're very supportive of one another. And so you'll see us together at school events and in the community. And we have one son, one child, a boy, he's 18. He's a freshman in college at New Mexico State University where he's playing football. He's on an athletic scholarship as a quarterback. And so is there any UT Longhorns here? Oh, there's more. Well, they play, they have a very tough schedule. You know how some of the big D1 schools schedule the mid-majors to kind of start the season with. So they'll be playing the Texas Longhorns this next weekend on the 31st. And so I'm excited to say a prayer for my boy that he walks out of there. But he's right now the second on the depth chart at quarterback. He had a great spring ball season. The coaches told us he'll get on the field. He'll be out there in some capacity against the Longhorns. So we're excited to go and support him out there. And again, he's a blessing to us, a great young man. And so very proud of him. Last but definitely not least is my passion is what I do and as an educator. I tell you, I'm so passionate about what I do. It's my life's work. There were some key educators that impacted my life greatly. And I wouldn't be here before you if it had not been for four folks that come to my mind. And I will continue to pay it forward as long as the good Lord gives me breath, to pay it forward to other young men and young women the way those folks did for me. And so that's a little bit about my personal background. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about my educational experiences and why I believe that I was the man for the job, and I'm glad that the board agreed with me. I believe I have some experiences that I believe that will vote well to move Wharton ISD forward. I started out as a coach. I've been in education for 20 years, starting my 21st year. Attended Stephen F. Austin, Lumberjacks. Are there any Bearcats? Sam Houston Bearcats here. There you go, one. He knows what I'm talking. There's two back there. But we had a healthy rivalry anyway. But had some great friends that attended Sam Houston. Started out coaching and teaching in East Texas after graduating from Stephen F. Austin. Taught and coached in Lufkin, at Lufkin ISD for 8 years, coaching and teaching. Had a great experience there. Learned a great deal. Loved the Piney Woods. I missed that state championship. They wanted, if there was any Aggies here, you know, Reggie McNeil from Lufkin, and they won the state championship in 01. I left a year early, and we got a chance to coach that young man, some other great athletes there. I had an opportunity to, my home, I'm born and raised in Dallas, Texas, and had an opportunity to relocate to the area with a coach, a buddy of mine that got a head job there, and had an opportunity to return home. And at that time, I was transitioning to administration to move my career forward. And then I became an administrator. I'll tell you, it was an interesting story. I was in graduate school. If you're familiar with Palacios, the superintendent there, Vicki Adams. I met Vicki Adams through we were in graduate school together. And Vicki kept nudging me about coming to apply for this elementary principal's job in Carson County, Texas. And I thought, Vicki, I'm a secondary guy. Coach, I don't have any administrative experience. those folks are not going to hire me. You know, I was very passionate. So, no, you've been a great fit. So right before they closed the job, I said, okay, I'll go there. Long story short, interviewed with the superintendent and site-based committee. They fell in love with me. I fell in love with them. They hired me. So this guy stepped into Carroll Elementary with no elementary experience and no background in administration. But I was fired up. I think they saw my passion. And I tell you, that school, I stepped into that school. It was 98% economically disadvantaged. The school was set in between two housing projects. One of those housing projects, the nickname, they called it Vietnam. It was very violent. No one wanted the job. It was a revolving door. No one wanted to be a part of this school. And so I said, well, by God, I go do it. Let's get after it. And so the good Lord blessed me with that opportunity. And I spent 4 years there. We took over that school. It was low performing, very apathetic part of the community, didn't believe in kids, and so on and so forth. It would take me all day to talk to you about some things we did in that school, but we did some unique things, and that's part of what I'm going to talk to you about. Two primary things that we're going to do in Wharton ISD that I think boded well and moved us forward at Carroll Elementary. In 4 years, to make a long story short, in 4 years, we transformed Carroll Elementary from a low-performing campus to a recognized campus. And we were very proud of that, and they have sustained that. Then I moved on from there. My goal was to move into a superintendency one day, so I knew I needed to get some secondary experience as an administrator. So I transitioned to an associate high school principal, and shortly after that, moved on to Mesquite ISD and became a high school principal at Mesquite High School. Inherited a very similar situation. Mesquite High School, very large high school, the largest high school in Mesquite ISD. If you're familiar with the Dallas area, Mesquite is a suburb of Dallas there, about 40,000 students, a large district there. Again, a situation where I had kind of given up on this group of kids. The school was an old school. If you see it, you see the layout was very challenging. It looked like a small junior college. It was a very large campus, almost 3,000 students. So it was very challenging. It was about 65% economically disadvantaged. So again, came in there, felt a lot more confident at this point because we had done it. You got it done at one school, so I thought, hey, we can get this done again. And so again, we got after it and did some similar things and turned this school around in 2 years and became a recognized campus. And coming into that school, the TEA had came in and what they call the TAT team, a technical assistance team, and because they're on the verge of becoming low performing, and brought some folks there to visit with the district and the schools, and we got in there and did some unique things. Again, a few things I'll talk with you about to move Mesquite ISD forward. And so I'm proud of those accomplishments, but I can assure you it was not about King David. We had a team of folks, and as I've said, and I continue to say, I could not do it alone. We had some critical people and community members and parents, and we pulled our resources together and moved those campuses forward. And so with that said, I'd like to concentrate on two areas. Again, what we do as educators, which many of you know is very challenging and very complex. But I try to make it simple in regards to how we go about transforming schools. I think that's critical. When we try to make things complicated, it's hard to move forward. And so there's two primary things, two things I'm going to focus on, which is what we focused on. There's a lot of things that was involved, a lot of intricacies that was involved in these two areas. But the first is we set forth high expectations for student success. That was critical. And that'll be critical in WISD. And what I'm referring to is student learning. At the end of the day, that's where the rubber meets the road. I will be judged, and rightfully so, and our administrators will be judged on student learning, how our students fare. And that's a critical piece. And in regards to student learning, at that time I came into Carroll Elementary, and the things we'll incorporate here, I was researching. There were so many needs, and I thought, wow, where do we start? Where do we start? At the time, I'm researching different educational experts and so on and so forth, so I came across a gentleman by the name of Dr. Richard Dufour. He was doing some work on professional learning communities and came up with 3 critical questions that we have to answer every day, every week, every year in schools. If you'd answer these critical questions, and I bought into that, and I believe in this, and they're pretty simple. But the first is, what do we want our students to learn? How will we know when our students have learned it? And how will we respond when they don't? Now, the first of those questions, what do we want our students to learn? The state has answered that for us. Our Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, the TEKS, They lay that out for us. We have a specific curriculum that we are charged to teach. Now we have to do some work with that. We have to be real specific and dig a little bit and know exactly what we're doing at a certain time of year. They've laid that out for us. Number two, how will we know when our students have learned it? They've somewhat laid that out for us. We have what we call now the STAR test, most recently the TAKS. They've set some standards that we have to fulfill. An assessment every year, we're going to be judged on it. In addition to that, any school you go to across this state and across this nation can also incorporate common assessments or benchmarking, because we have to inform our instruction throughout the year. We can't wait till a state assessment at the end of the school year and decide how our students are doing. So every 6 weeks, as we test our kids, and what I mean by common assessment, every teacher in specific areas, to give you an example, 4th grade teachers teaching math, they're going to give students a common assessment. We've given them laid out, again, that course number 1, the state has told us we have a scope and sequence. We teach this and impart this information to our kids for the first 6 weeks. We're going to test and see how our kids did at the end of the 6 weeks based on these common assessments. So now we can inform instruction as we move forward. Didn't do so hot on this, we need to go back and think about some things we can do differently. We can't wait and make those decisions at the end of the year, it's too late. Okay, so that's primarily been laid out for us. Number 3, how will we respond when they don't? That's the critical piece. I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that's what separates good to great schools from poor to average schools. But I figured out pretty quickly as I was studying DuFour's work is that most folks don't spend enough time on that piece. That's where we get lost. We know what to teach them. We know how to assess them. But then when they don't quite get it, when those results come in, we're kind of at a loss what to do at that point. And so what we began to do is spend more time in that piece, on that piece, answering that question. And spending time on that question, it takes an enormous amount of time. And that's where we have to spend time, create time. And I must say the district has done a good job in creating opportunities for teachers. If you've heard of data periods and PLCs, professional learning communities, we have some things in place which I'm excited about, some opportunities for teachers to get together and to discuss this very thing. And those things are during our school day, which are awesome. So we had to spend a great deal of time figuring that piece out. And so I can assure you districts across, when I talked to colleagues as I was going to conferences, trust me, we're all there at the same conferences. We're all there reading the same books. We're all employing the same strategies. You can go to any school throughout America, throughout the state, and we'll be doing very similar things in regards to strategies. So I knew at Carroll Elementary, I thought, well, heck, everybody's doing the same thing. So what's the difference? But what I realized, again, what set us apart, what I was going to have to set us apart, we went deeper. We went more in depth. Folks are doing things on the surface level. Okay, we have to go deeper and drill down deeper into some of these strategies. I'll give you a quick example. Every school you go into, probably in the state and across the nation, will be doing what we call instructional rounds or walkthroughs, for instance. And what I discovered pretty quickly, that means we're going to go into classrooms, which is very important. We'll do that here in Wharton ISD. We'll go into classrooms and to see what's going on in our classrooms. A group of administrators will go in there and observe instruction and make decisions on things that we need to do as we move forward. So everybody does that as an administrator. You have quotas, like Mesquite ISD, for instance. We, as a principal, I had to do at least 10 of those per week, and so on and so forth. But what I realized, folks were just getting it done. What were they doing with the information? So when I say go deeper, everybody's doing that. But what are we going to do? What does good and great schools do? They go deeper with that. What I realized pretty quick as a principal, we were doing it. We were getting our quotas met, but we were not going deeper with that information. What I realized as a principal, I had 7 assistant principals. So the way a high school typically works, you have very large, very challenging, very large high school. I had 7 assistants. So I had one assistant that was in charge of the math department, another assistant in charge of the science department, if you will. So those folks had to evaluate those teachers. But I realized that we were not aligned as an administrative team. You may see, Administrator A may see something and think this is great instruction, and I could see the same thing and beg to differ. And so the way we were informing our instruction, we were not aligned. And so what we started to do, instead of doing things in isolation, we went in there together. Because we had to get our quotas done, so we said, no, let's stop. Let's go in there, all 7, 8 of us would go in the classrooms together, come back and debrief, talk about, hey, what did you see? What did I see? And we realized pretty quickly what you saw was totally different. Your perception of that was totally different from mine. You wouldn't have ever thought that. You just assumed the educated folks see the same thing and we know what's best for kids, and that's not always true. And so we began to discuss and go deeper with that and talk about really studying what the research and things of that nature to find out what are truly good methodology and pedagogy in regards to instruction. So we got on the same page. It's critical that our leadership team's on the same page and that we are aligned. That sounds very simple, but you may be amazed or may not. If you go to certain districts, certain schools, they're not aligned. You have things in isolation. One school is doing this, another school is, or one principal is doing this, another principal is doing that. We must be aligned, and we will do that. That's just a small example of how we will put student learning first and, employ certain strategies. Also, there's certain things that we won't wait. I don't have to wait to determine. What walkthroughs and instructional rounds do, we gather data, and certain things will give us certain trends and patterns in regards to things, and in order for us to make decisions going forward. Certain things, I don't have to wait for that. I have data right now. We're going to make decisions right now. And so to give you an example for that, writing. When the writing scores came in from the state of Texas, they were horrible across the state. It's not in Wharton ISD. But everybody's calling everybody again, colleagues, wow, did you see the writing scores? So what we've realized is we have ignored writing. It has become a lost art. Considering text messaging, kids do not write anymore. They don't know how to write effectively. And so we're going to spend some time in that. We're going to do some things that in one district got it right. I was reading an article recently in Plano ISD, for instance, which is a suburb of Dallas there. They've been concentrating on writing for years. Their scores were great because they made it a priority, made it a focus. And so what's critical is we're finding now that folks tend to literacy, there's different components of literacy, but we tend to concentrate only on the reading, which obviously that's very important. And we never move to the writing piece. So many of our students falter when they go to college and have to write and do some extensive writing. And so we're going to look at some things, we're doing some things across curriculum areas. Students can write in math. Instead of giving you an answer, giving you another answer, write out the answer. Explain to me how did you go about getting that answer. There's certain strategies that we're going to talk about, again, going deeper and not doing things surface level. So again, just a small example. Again, we will have high expectations for student success throughout our schools. These are a few small examples. And at the end of this, I would definitely give you the opportunity to ask us more questions of some more specific things that we're going to do. The next thing the second thing I like to focus on real quick, which is very near and dear to me, and I can tell you without batting an eye, ladies and gentlemen, without this, we will not be successful. We will not move Wharton ISD forward. And I realized this pretty quickly. And that's if we do not believe in our students and build relationships with our kids. And when I say that, what I'm talking about is folks give rhetoric to that. I know from my personal experience, as I was sitting in that school wondering, God, what did I do here? And you led me to this place, and I don't believe that our good Lord would allow a problem to exist without a solution. I don't believe it. So I knew that there was a solution to this problem. And so as I began to think about my own personal experiences in school, I began to think about the educators who impacted me. And I knew I was sitting in an office for, because some folks made a difference in my life. And I thought, what did they do for me? How am I here? And I began to reflect on that. Those folks believed in me. They inspired me. They motivated me. They didn't wait for, I can tell you, a little more specifically about my background, and let me go backwards a little bit, and why these folks became so instrumental in my life. I was primarily raised by my grandparents until about middle school, and then I moved back to my mother in a single parent home. And my grandparents were, gosh, amazing, amazing people. But from the school's perception, or perspective from my parents, or their perception of my grandparents would have been that they were not involved and did not care about this, but they did. My grandmother could not drive, did not have a license, never did. My grandfather worked. But they had very high expectations for us. So they could not come to a school. They could not come and participate. I had an absentee father. So if they were waiting for my dad to come, it wasn't happening. My mother was working, she was out, she did the best she could, but she was somewhat absent for a while. And so there are some critical people, and I've heard teachers say this, I'm very passionate, I've become unglued if I ever hear it, is that that's not my job. They just pay me to teach. And I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, if we do that and take that attitude, we will not reach kids.
That's right.
I can assure you. We do more than just teach ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. And I started again reflecting, those are the people that impacted my life. I think about Coach Leonard Bishop, just an amazing gentleman. When I was making excuses because my dad wasn't there, and other excuses, I was a very angry, violent young man at a certain time in my life. And I tell you, he said some things to me that he'd been in a lot of trouble if but I needed to hear it. And I tell you, he held me accountable. And that man loved me, and I thank him for that. But what he did for me, he held me accountable. I tell you some things he did. I remember he stayed on my back. I'll tell you a quick story. I remember one day he made me set goals. He said, man, what are you going to do with your life? What do you want to do? I said, Coach, I don't know. And he gave me an assignment. He said, by tomorrow, I want you to research. You better come back tomorrow. You better have an answer for me. What are you going to do? What's your career choice in life? Of course, I didn't do the assignment, came back to school. So, all right, what are you going to do? So to get him off my back, you know, a lot of kids, you ask them during the time, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer. So I just said, I'm going to tell him I'm going to do what he's doing. I want to teach and coach. I want to be a teacher and a coach. You know, well, great. So I'm thinking it's over. Well, how are you going to do that? What's the process in doing that? I didn't have a clue. I'm an 8th grader. So I don't know. I guess I'm going to go apply to a teacher and a coach. But, so again, he done bailed me out. I want you to go research and find out the steps in order to do that. So I had to go and do that. And so long story short, he held me accountable, made me go research these things, held me accountable every single day. Now, if Coach Leonard Bishop had waited and made the choice, well, that's not my job. His mama's not there, his daddy's not there, grandma can't drive, she can't get up to the school, so too bad. That's their problem. I wouldn't be standing before you today. So I thank God for those people that bridged it, that stood in the gaps for me. And there were some other folks that stood in the gap for me. I can tell you, kids will run through a brick wall for folks that they know genuinely care and love them, I can assure you. As a student, there were some folks I knew that loved me and cared about me and didn't prejudge me based on the look that I had at that time. It wasn't a real nice look. But they didn't prejudge me, they loved me. I gave them everything that I had in that classroom. Never gave them a problem. Now you would thought I was a different kid. When I went into somebody else's class, so I knew. I believe God gives us an innate ability. When you know, kids know, you can't fool them. They know when you care about them, trust me. And I knew some didn't. I knew some prejudged me. They didn't like me. And I tell you, I gave it to them. I did, and it hurt me. But I was not at that time intelligent enough to understand it. I just knew they didn't like me, so I don't like them, and I'm going to give it to them. And I suffered a little bit from it, but I didn't care. And so kids, it's hard for them to connect. So I say that not to belabor that point. That is a critical piece. We will talk about that. Our presenters that came the first few days of this week, phenomenal presenters. And we talked about some initiatives and things that we're going to do. And we're going to incorporate some things that will vote well for us in building relationships and making connections with students. That is critical for us to move forward. Now I want to show you a video here quickly that I think articulates it way better than I can. I found this video. This occurred in 2010. A young man, an elementary student in Dallas ISD, stood before over 20,000 adults and delivered a heck of a message about believing in him and his peers. And that was very powerful. And so I will not belabor this point if we can get that started. I can tell you, I get fired up. I watch that every year. I went viral in about 2010 when I was still in the Dallas area. And I tell you, I try to watch that, a few colleagues and I, and reflect on it. But I can tell you, again, without tearing up, I tell you, I get emotional about some folks that impacted me. But they broke a poverty cycle in my family. I'm a college graduate. My son will be a college graduate. My grandchildren will be. That's why that's so impactful for me. And so I tell you folks, every single day I give you the very best that I have. These are my babies now. And again, we must believe in our kids. They got to know that we love them. We got to connect with them. Because again, I know it personally. And so I promise you that I give you my very best every day. I give our kids our very best every day. And so again, I open up for questions. I apologize. I don't understand. Anyhow, I know there may be plenty of questions for me. If there are, you please at this time around, is that okay? I didn't know if we want to open up for any questions. I know I was in kind of general in some areas, so please don't be shy. So I want you guys to know where we're headed in WISD.
What are your thoughts on discipline?
Very good question. Good question. And so that's why I say a lot of this is very general. That piece right there, building relationships, is critical. I can tell you, discipline, without effective discipline, I can tell you your learning would be minimal. It won't take place. We absolutely must have a safe and orderly environment. Now, but what I say about that is, in my experiences, 95%, typically in discipline situations, administrators will tell you this, as my experience as an administrator, 90% of kids in most schools do the right thing. It feels like they don't. You typically have a 10% of your kids, it's a revolving door. Now those same 10% can make it feel like, oh my goodness, one kid in one class, it takes an enormous amount of time. But I tell you, that other 10 to 15% of kids, if you do this piece right here, that's why I say this is a general thing. It's about making connections and building relationships with students. Well, we spent an enormous amount of time. One of the best compliments that I received as an administrator. And I didn't realize I was doing something so great. But when I was seeing kids, then there was moments I had to, because I can tell you, nobody in the state of Texas across the nation is as tough as I am on discipline. I am very passionate about holding folks accountable, because folks held me accountable. We won't enable folks based on their background. And so that's the worst thing we can do. But what I'm saying is, I went over to, anytime I assigned students DAP, they had to leave my campus for whatever behavior they had been involved in, I went to check on my kids. They were my kids. So when I went over, and I would do this frequently, once a week, because they're coming back to me, and I wanted to build a relationship with this. Hey man, I still love you. You made a choice, and you're going to deal with your consequences. But I understand when you get back, I still love you. We're going to start over. You get a fresh start with me. So when I left, so some of my kids, so the recidivism for my kids returning dropped a grade level. Mesquite High School, when I got there, after I was there 1 year, DAP placement dropped by over 60%. They didn't return. They didn't go back. And so when I visited with our DAP principal, he told me, he said, man, you are the only principal in this district that come to check on your kids. They came over here to build relationships with them, and you didn't just throw them away. Don't mean I didn't discipline them. So that's a critical piece. We have to, while we're disciplining kids, because we'll hold them accountable, I can assure you. But while we're doing that simultaneously, it can't always be punitive. We have to build relationships with students, dig deeper, find out why they're doing some of the things. As a 10-year-old, I could not articulate to an adult why I was so angry and violent. I was angry. Now, as a male, as a 43-year-old man, I can articulate to you why, you know, my dad wasn't there. I was angry. I was upset. Now I can connect to some things of why I did some things. But some adults helped me to, Coach Leonard Bishop, a critical person in my life, helped me to connect with that. And to start talking to me about, man, have you thought about, this is probably why you acted, so on and so forth. If you're not careful, you're going to end up being the same way. If you don't want to end up, you know, so we have to continue to connect that. And again, I don't want to oversimplify this, but that's a critical piece in curtailing behavior issues as well. And so, but absolutely, we will be tough on this, and I can assure you that. We will have a high expectation in that regard. Anything else? And I'd like to leave you, if there's any, and I want to say this too, I know you know our demographics. We have, I think, 80%, it's right at 81% economic disadvantage. And again, I want to go on record saying that, again, though that doesn't equate to not being able to perform at a high level instruction and learning. It doesn't mean that. And that's why we have to support that and continue to remind our babies of that. Your background will not dictate your future. And in that same breath, I want to say to you, I'm for all kids. We have 80% economic disadvantage, and a great majority of our students will spend a lot of time dealing with certain issues, but all of our students, I'm passionate about everything. I use my son as an example. My son graduated in the top 5% of his class. He's a very bright young man, and my wife and I poured a lot into him. And so we don't give teachers all the credit, because we spend a lot of time preparing him. And so what I'm saying with that, I feel like in some respects my son and students like my son was pushed to the back burner sometimes. And I get that we're going to spend a lot of time and employ a lot of energy and resources into kids we have to, into those students that need it the most. But simultaneously, we will work tirelessly as well with our top students as well. We will push them forward. Give you a quick example, at Mesquite High School, we realized pretty quickly that some of our best and brightest kids still was not reaching their fullest potential. They were in our AP classes and so on and so forth. They were not passing AP exams. We had 0%. They were in AP class, they couldn't pass an AP exam. You know, if you pass an AP exam, you get college credit. You can go into college with certain credits. We had students that, I never worried about those two. I knew they were going to at least meet minimum expectations on the tax test. I knew that. I knew I could count on them for passing. That wasn't good enough. We realized not enough of those students were reaching the exceed expectations level. So we were not expecting level. You know, it was a gravy train. If you taught AP, you had the good kids and you didn't have to do as much, and we challenged those folks. No, we're going to push these kids too. We need more kids passing AP exams, doing better on the SAT, ACT exams. And so I want to leave you with that. We're going to work with all students and put resources into all our kids.
Mr. Davis.
Yes, sir.
I'm known for asking unusual questions. Something that is nice. There's one thing, you talk about economically
Disadvantages.
disadvantage. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I don't even like the 3 words, but that's okay.
All right.
When things get tough, we're not going to hear that from you, are we?
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
When all of a sudden, the things that you're wanting to do, you know, wanting to get these kids up and get them going, and maybe we're not getting to where you want to be fast enough, we're not going to hear the economic disadvantage word come out. Blaming that, our failures as a community or a school on the economic disadvantage.
Sure.
It frustrated me to death the past couple of administrations that we would say, oh, well, that's not our fault, they're poor. And I can't buy that.
I can't either.
It's good.
Yes, sir. That's a very good question. I can tell you, man, I hope you can go ask Hope teachers to remember me this quote. And I told them that we will not blame kids. We're the adults. We're the experts. Now, I tell you that that's a factor. Any research will tell you, yeah, it's more challenging. There's more difficulty. There's more layers involved when you teach a kid from a poverty-stricken background, opposed to teaching a kid from Highland Park in Dallas, if you're familiar with that area, $1 million home. Absolutely, there's a challenge there. I can assure you that. But to excuse us from not reaching them, absolutely not. There are some things, or sometimes it takes more time, or it takes more resources, there's other things involved. So that's why I say to you and appeal to you, it will take all of us. We will need resources. We'll need things. And so as I'm starting some processes, again, I try to keep things simple. Students that come to school behind in school, another researcher, Dr. Schleck, to keep it simple, they need more time and more support. And that's what we do to try to reach kids that come from behind. And so again, there's some unique things you do to get more time and more support for those babies. It's a very good question. Thank you. Anything else?
Well, let's give